as we defend the United States of America, as we defend our Constitution, as we defend our freedom, and we will not go quietly into the night. We will defend.
While millions of Texans are without power during the state's biggest environmental crisis in recent history, Senator Ted Cruz is abandoning them to take a family vacation to a luxurious resort in Cancun. Cruz's Cancun vacation comes at a time when his constituents are facing life-threatening conditions and pleading for help from the federal government. While Cruz was in the United Airlines VIP lounge, a Houston woman and her 8-year-old child died from carbon monoxide poisoning while trying to get warm in their car. While Texas's junior U.S. Senator was on his way to the sandy beaches of Cancun, his constituents were lining up to fill bottles from a water fountain in a public park because they had no running water at home. Ted Cruz doesn't care about helping Texas families. He doesn't deserve to represent them in the Senate.
Fly me to Cancun, let me screw that old Lone Star. Down there at the Ritz Hotel, they've got an open bar. I'll get some bird, then I'll tan, safe and warm while they're freezing. Fill my whiskey glass while they shop in the empty stores. Let them boil their water while I frolic on the shore. Had second thoughts, still I flew, but I got caught, they all knew. Blamed it on my...
Tired from an insurrection you incited against your government? Is your state suffering from predictable consequences of a natural disaster caused by your failed leadership? Then it's time for you to throw your constituents and Constitution away and escape to Cancun. Constituents underwater? You can be too on one of our reef and shipwreck snorkeling tours. Feeling homesick? Visit the Mayan ruins. No electricity, undrinkable water. It's like you never left Houston. So hurry up, flee in glee, and bask in the glow of red-hot sedition in Cancun. Midas Touch is responsible for the content of this advertising.
It's crazy that we'd be taking a recess. Let's not take any recesses. Let's work every day. Let's work weekends. Let's work till we get the job done. Apparently, the majority leader made the decision that it was more important for senators to be home on vacation, home playing golf, home doing anything, but being here on the floor of the Senate doing the people's business.
President Obama, and for that matter, Hillary Clinton and the Democrats.
Ever-evolving story from the absentee junior Republican senator from that state, Ted Cruz. Cruz spent the day lying while his constituents continued dying. At least 23 people across Texas have lost their lives this week from hypothermia, from accidents trying to heat their homes using kitchen stoves or keeping their kids warm in their cars. People are running out of food and water. And let's not forget, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, so heading to a shelter is a pretty frightening concept. Millions of Texans are still struggling without power after severe winter weather shut down much of the power grid. It's an absolute disaster. And as for Ted Cruz, fresh off his stint toying with insurrection, well, he just returned from his 24-hour sojourn south of the border with the fam. Because who wouldn't want a little getaway to a beach resort in Mexico when their state is in crisis? Senator Cruz's story about why he was out of the country has, shall we say, evolved over time. Here's Ted speaking to reporters from Telemundo before boarding his emergency flight back home after getting busted for the trip.
Well, Texas is going through horrific storms, and millions of Texans have lost power and lost heat and have been hurting. And our family was among them. We had no heat and no power. And yesterday, my daughters asked if they could take a trip with some friends, and I
Heidi and I agreed, so I flew down with them last night, dropped them off here, and now I'm headed back to Texas and back to continuing to work to try to get the power on. What's happening in Texas is unacceptable, and a lot of Texans are hurting.
Cruz also released a statement today trying to justify the terrible timing, saying he just wanted to be a good dad. His daughters, after all, needed an adult travel companion for their play date abroad. I will note and remind you they do have a mother. Her name is Heidi. He just mentioned her. Cruz, however, doubled down on the message that his daughters aren't just in Cancun, they're also under the bus. Texas clearly has an absentee senator, which is kind of perfect. And of course, he's far from the only villain. We're going to get to the rest of them later. But now, here comes the part about the lying. Ted Cruz claimed that one reason that he ditched his state was because his house didn't have power. But on Monday, on conservative Joe Pagg's radio show, Raphael the Canadian said something very different.
In Houston, thankfully my home, we didn't lose power, so right now we've got a bunch of the neighborhood kids all over playing with our girls because their parents lost power and our house was lucky. So we've got kids running up and down the stairs right now.
Okay, I guess it's theoretical that maybe he lost power after the show, but Ted, come on. Is that why your Palm Beach boss man called you lying, Ted Cruz? I mean, he wasn't right about a lot. No, he wasn't right about almost anything, but that one? Eh. You know what it means to be a good dad, Ted? How about the father who spent hours scouring his Houston neighborhood for fallen trees and rotten wood to feed a fireplace to keep his family warm? That's a good dad. And you know who else would like to escape Texas right now and be warm and safe and maybe take a shower and find food for their kids? The millions of Texans who have been forced to use stoves, barbecue grills, or their vehicles as a heat source, with authorities now ordering 7 million people to boil their tap water before drinking it after days of record low temperatures damaged infrastructure and froze the water pipes. Oh, we see you, Ted Cruz. We see you in your supposedly overnight suitcase bursting at the seams, its expanded option clearly utilized. We see you branding this as a 24-hour chaperone trip for your kids, even though you were originally scheduled to return on Saturday. We see you wearing a Texas flag mask, as if Texas is always on your mind. Meanwhile, in your state, this is what's happening.
It was colder in my living room than inside the refrigerator. That's how cold it was.
There were no water in the store. We only have like 2 cases of water left, so we're trying to divide it between 2 families.
Right now, we're really concerned about how fast the temperature is really dropping inside.
It's, you know, either you stay in your house and, you know, you are cold and you freeze to death and you have no food. This is really what's happening here in Houston. This is people's lives right now, right? Or you go out and go from hotel to hotel, hoping you find something and you risk, you know, getting COVID.
But here's what I'd like to do. If you're willing, I'll stay around after this is over, and maybe we can talk a few minutes and see if I can get you some help.
America learned the hard way through Donald Trump that you cannot teach empathy. Senator Cruz is not the only politician who lacks empathy, but he's one of the few who have been stupid enough to publicly prove that he does not care about his constituents' suffering.
From New York, I'm Chris Hayes. There is some light at the end of the tunnel for Texans tonight who have been suffering through back-to-back winter storms, record low temperatures, and power outages affecting both electricity and heat and even water all week. The good news is that power has now been restored for millions of residents, less than 400,000 people still waiting for the lights to come back on, down from highs over 4 million earlier this week. The Texas Tribune reporting today, the state's power grid was, quote, seconds and minutes away from a catastrophic failure that could have left Texans in the dark for months. Officials saying that if operators had not acted in that moment, early Monday morning, to start rolling blackouts, that's blackouts they themselves were controlling, it could have left Texas in an indeterminately long crisis. Think about that, minutes and seconds away. The state, though, remains in a precarious situation tonight, with freezing temperatures around the state expected until Saturday. There is an ongoing food crisis as disruptions to the supply chain resulted in shortages. We've seen monstrously long lines for grocery stores in multiple cities. And there's a massive water crisis. Hospitals have been without water as they take care of patients amid a pandemic. And 7 million Texans are now under a boil water order. The freezing temperatures have affected water pump systems and treatment plants, caused pipes to burst, all of it a kind of cascade of problems.
Pipes are bursting and leaving a huge mess. Look at that inside many homes.
Just one more layer of misery for so many families during this winter storm.
Here at the Riley home, you can see their ceiling came crashing down into the master bedroom, caused lots of damage.
Emergency officials now fielding hundreds of calls related to carbon monoxide poisoning as people resort to desperate measures to stay warm.
Do not use grills indoors and do not run your car inside your garage.
With limited water, even fire departments are struggling to battle blazes.
They're running from one call to the next, trying to do the best that they can.
With 2 young kids, the Grahams had already given up on staying in their Rockwall home when the inside temp dipped to 40 degrees Monday night. This was the scene waiting for them when they got back.
It had burst through the ceiling and water was pouring everywhere in our living room. The water had spread to our front entry, to our front den, to our kitchen.
Now the water? Oh my God.
Fueling frustration for people like Plano resident Mohammed Alwari, even after getting his wife, toddler, and infant finally to a warm place.
You know, how many people, how many families in an apartment with little kids that they are suffering now because of what's going on, because the responsible people or the people in charge didn't make the proper calculation for the power consumption?
It has been an urgent all-hands-on-deck situation in much of the state for the last 3 or 4 nights, as we have been reporting night after night, with people opening their doors to strangers, like Houston furniture store owner Mattress Mac, welcoming the community into shelter and showrooms. Several Austin restaurants and bars doing the same, ones that had power operating as kind of warming centers, giving water out. Beto O'Rourke organized more than 150,000 calls to check on senior citizens across the state. And of course, the junior senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, flew to Cancun. You maybe have heard about this by now. If you're watching this program, I suspect you have. Yesterday evening, these pictures started to trickle out online, showing what certainly appear to be Ted Cruz and his family at the Houston airport taking an outbound flight to Cancun, Mexico, as millions of his constituents were freezing, huddling around fire pits fueled by anything they could get their hands on to burn. Social media sleuths matched the mask, ring, glasses, and the photos of those worn by Cruz. Noted the timing coincided with a 4:44 p.m. United flight. NBC News confirmed that Cruz's staff even called up Houston police officers to escort him through the airport as if they didn't have anything better to do. Cruz's wife, Heidi, reportedly sent text messages to friends saying their house was, all caps, freezing, which I imagine it was, and invited others to join them at the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun, where they had stayed many times. Amidst the ensuing firestorm, at 6 a.m. today, Cruz booked a new return flight from Cancun to Houston, a source telling NBC that he was initially booked on a flight returning on Saturday. Late this evening, the senator gave an impromptu interview in front of some shrubs at his home and came clean about the whole thing.
We left yesterday. The plan had been to stay through the weekend with the family. That was the plan. And you know, I have to admit, it was... The last week's been tough on a lot of folks. Our girls, when they got the news that school was canceled this week, they said, "Look, why don't we take a trip? Let's go somewhere where it's not so cold." And Heidi and I, this had been a tough week, and this has been a tough year for kids all across the state of Texas. And so we were trying to be good parents and said, "Okay, we'll do it." And so we booked the flight. You know, I have to admit, I started having second thoughts almost the moment I sat down on the plane.
Yeah, I can imagine he had some second thoughts. He's right. It has been hard on kids this year. At some level, you can almost understand that from Ted Cruz's perspective, what exactly is the big deal? I mean, Ted Cruz sees his job as basically being a guy who records a podcast, goes on Fox News, and tweets snarky jokes. And increasingly, that's what being a conservative politician is. It's a form of performative trolling. And what is he supposed to do about a frozen pipeline anyway?
I get that it's bad optics for Ted Cruz to take his family on vacation to Cancun right now. It even sounds bad. But let's be real about this for just 1 second. This is one of the stupidest aspects of our politics. Like, what exactly? It's not a real-time crisis that Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, can do anything about. Did they expect Ted to go there with, like, a blowtorch and start defrosting all of the pipelines?
Just an amazingly revealing statement from a conservative professional talker about what conservatives think governing is. Like, yeah, what's he supposed to do? Senators have constituent services. They have deep networks of powerful people. They can liaison between different levels of government. They can marshal resources. They can highlight problems to federal officials. There are a million things a senator can do in the middle of disaster. If they don't know what to do, just go door to door and check on people in a mask. But none of that appears to interest a politician like Ted Cruz, who sees himself as basically Rush Limbaugh with the Senate office. And it's not just Ted Cruz, it's bigger than him. We saw the apotheosis of this with Donald Trump's management of COVID, where he turned the pandemic into basically a daily television show, doing none of the actual work to make the crisis better. In fact, making it worse at every turn, getting people killed. But it was simply another platform for the former president. In fact, at one point, he was actually thinking of starting a White House radio show, but he decided he didn't want to compete with Rush Limbaugh. Governing is not posting. It's not podcasting. It's not cable news anchoring. Believe me, both my parents worked as civil servants in city government, and I have a cable news show, and they had harder jobs than I do. What we've seen this week in Texas is a total failure of governance. But it's not just Ted Cruz. I mean, the way to climb the ladder in Republican politics, as Donald Trump showed, is not to be good at governing. That doesn't get you anywhere. It is to performatively troll the libs. And that is exactly what Republicans in Texas have been doing for much of the last decade, since the last time a crisis like this happened. Instead of preparing for this foreseeable catastrophe, they've been doing things like regulating who can use what bathroom, attacking Planned Parenthood, considering the death penalty for women who get abortions, removing discrimination protections so social workers can turn away LGBTQ disabled clients, protecting Chick-fil-A from religious discrimination, removing voting drop boxes, trying to make Texas a Second Amendment sanctuary state, and most recently, and perhaps most importantly, fighting with sports teams over playing the national anthem. None of that's going to help you when the power is out and it's freezing and there's no water. Then your performative owning of the libs looks really irrelevant and really dumb.
Means that 14 million people in Texas don't have clean drinking water tonight. That's basically half the state of Texas. And not having clean drinking water is a very dangerous, very unsustainable problem. Being told to boil your water when you might not even have electricity to power any means of boiling the water is, of course, ridiculous. It's insult on top of injury. But it turns out people in Texas with dirty, undrinkable water coming out of their taps right now, in some ways, they're the lucky ones. One Austin resident telling the Wall Street Journal tonight, quote, "I'm like, great, you're telling us to boil water, but nobody's talking about the fact that I know one person who has water, and I'm driving to that person's house right now to get some. What water are we supposed to boil?" People in Texas have been bailing water out of swimming pools. They can find pools that aren't frozen. They're bailing water out of swimming pools to fill up their toilets. They've been melting snow on outdoor fire pits because the only water they have is the frozen stuff that's fallen on their lawns, the stuff that came out of the sky. I mean, this is Houston, Texas, America's fourth largest city. People waiting in line with buckets at a local park to fill them up because somebody found that there was still water coming out of that one spigot. The entire city of Austin is under a boil water notice. Thousands of people have dry taps. Austin officials have told people in that city to be prepared to be without water, potentially for days. One Austin resident telling the local NBC affiliate that she stockpiled water last week just in case. She'd even filled up one of her bathtubs. But now she and her family are down to the end of that stockpiled supply. They have just a half case of bottled water left for the family. She said, quote, "If we knew this was going to be 1 day or 2 days, that would be one thing. But not knowing and the possibility of extending longer makes it pretty hard to deal with because we do not know what to plan for." And beyond individual households in Austin, it's not just households that use water. The crisis also is now a huge problem for the city's hospitals. Last night, St. David's Hospital in Austin had their water cut off. Disaster in Texas right now. This was Southwest Houston today. People waiting in line for hours in the cold to get propane. This was a line outside a fast food restaurant in Austin. People don't just need propane. They don't just need water. They need food. Fast food restaurants open, this is the kind of line you're getting. A line of cars stretching all the way down the block. Grocery stores have been mobbed with people. The shelves in many stores are bare. Some grocery stores were closed for days because they didn't have power. Freezing temperatures and rolling power outages have thrown a monkey wrench in the supply chain for everything. One Austin resident telling the Texas Tribune about her recent trip to Target, quote, "The store was out of meat and eggs and almost all milk before I left. Lines were wrapped around the store when we arrived. Shelves were almost fully cleared for potatoes, meat, eggs, and some dairy." She said her neighbor went to that same store 2 days later. By then, it was completely out of food. There was no sign that more shipments were on the way, no employees restocking shelves, nothing to restock them with. And people living in one of the largest states in the country are living with no electricity, no heat, no water, scrounging for non-potable water and for food. This has been going on for the better part of a week. It was not, in the midst of that, it was not until yesterday that the Republican governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, held a public press conference to talk to the people of Texas about what's been going on, what the state is trying to do to fix it. This is how the Texas Tribune summed up what Governor Abbott said at the press conference, quote, "Abbott provides few details on when Texan suffering will end as state's crises mount."
Fly me to Cancun, let me screw that old Lone Star. Down there at the Ritz Hotel, they've got an open bar. I'll get sunburned, then I'll tan, safe and warm while they're freezing. Fill my whiskey glass while they shop in the empty stores. Let them boil their water while I frolic on the shore. Had second thoughts.
43 Senate Republicans whose vote to acquit Donald Trump was a vote in support of the insurrection. 43 Senate Republicans who have sided with fascism, with racism, who condone the death and violent assault on police officers that took place on January 6th. 43 Senate Republicans who have made it official that the Republican Party is no longer conservative, but the party of Trump. Do not let the 43 Republicans run or hide from what they are. 43 traitors. Remember their names. Midas Touch is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Fly me to Cancun, let me screw that old Lone Star. Down there at the Ritz Hotel, they've got an open bar. I'll get sunburned, then I'll tan, safe and warm while they're freezing. Fill my whiskey glass while they shop in the empty stores. Let them boil their water while I frolic on the shore. Had second thoughts, still I flew, but I got caught, they all knew. Blamed it on my kids, threw them underneath the bus. Everyone in Texas knows I'm someone they can't trust. In 24, I will lose. In 24, no one will vote for Cruz.